What's up, sports bettors? My name is Matt Modi. I'm a content producer and betting analyst for OddsJam.com. And in this video, I'm going to be answering the question a lot of people have asked me, which is just how much should I put on a bet? How much money should I bet when I'm placing a bet? I've had a lot of people ask me this question, and I appreciate everybody reaching out and asking questions. So I figured it would make sense to just do a video answering that exact question. I'll go through my process of how I go about deciding how much money I should put on an individual bet and all that good stuff. Before I get started, would appreciate if you could like and comment on the video. Just want to make sure that this is something that you enjoy, so let me know what you think. Even if it's negative, totally fine. Let me know what you think. And then, of course, if you could subscribe to the OddsJam YouTube channel. We have a ton of helpful content out here on the channel, whether it's best bets or just informational videos such as this one. Regardless, if you subscribe to the OddsJam YouTube channel, whether you are a beginner or an expert sports bettor, I think it could be extremely beneficial. So go ahead and click that plus button and subscribe, and let's get into it. So whenever someone is asking the question of how much money should they put on an individual bet, it's essentially they're asking about bankroll management. How should they manage their bankroll? Now, to start, your bankroll is essentially the amount of money that you're comfortable dedicating to sports betting. So that is something that you're going to have to figure out yourself. I unfortunately can't figure it out for you. It's up to you and your financial situation to determine how much money you're comfortable betting on sports. Now, of course, the obvious disclaimer here is to make sure that you do it responsibly. Whatever that you decide your bankroll should be, it's got to be something that you're comfortable betting and a number that you can obviously live without. Because if you're dedicating it towards sports betting, it's not going to be available to pay your bills and any other type of expenses you can have. So the first thing, the most important thing when determining your bankroll is understand how much you're comfortable dedicating towards betting on sports. And you have to do it responsibly. If not, you're going to get in a dangerous place and it's not going to be fun and it's not what sports betting is meant to be. Okay, so now that you've determined what your bankroll is, everything that I mentioned from here on out is going to be a percent of your bankroll because obviously the actual dollar amount is going to be different depending on the bankroll. So the easiest way to think about it is just in terms of a percent of your bankroll. So for the sake of this video, for the ease of numbers, I'm just going to be assuming a $1,000 bankroll because that's the easiest way to explain things. So 1% would be $10, 20% would be $2, so on, and then 5% would be $50. One thing I do want to stop and highlight and mention is that on one specific bet, the max that you should ever place is 5% of your bankroll. So again, on a $1,000 bankroll, the most you should put on one individual bet is $50. That's just general bankroll management best practices. So one way to bet responsibly and understand what your bankroll is that the max you should be betting is 5% of your bankroll. So again, on a $1,000 bankroll, you should never be betting over $50 on one individual bet. Everything that you place should be between 1% and 5%, or I guess 0.1% and 5%. Everything should be within that range. So before I detail what my specific strategy is, there are a couple beginner strategies that you might have read about if you've done any research that I would like to talk about and then also not recommend. I don't think they're good strategies. Number one, and this is the most beginner one, is just putting a flat rate on every single bet no matter what. So regardless of your confidence in the bet and regardless of the odds, you place $10, $15, $20 on every bet no matter what. This, like I said, is not something that I would recommend. It's hard to be profitable with this strategy. And the logic being, not every bet is created equal. There are some bets where if you're getting a really good line and you're really confident in it and you have a huge edge, you should put up to 5% of your bankroll on. Now, of course, there are other bets, if you're not as confident or it's more of a long shot, kind of a lottery ticket type play, should only be 1% of your bankroll. But regardless, there should be some sort of scale in between, up to 1%, from 1% up to 5% and everything in between. Not everything should be getting 2% or 3% or whatever the amount is. It's really hard, like I said, to be profitable that way. So I would recommend strongly against using any type of system where you're just placing the same amount on every single bet. Now, the next one that I want to talk about is betting based on a unit scale. Now, there's nothing wrong with betting on a unit scale. That's actually kind of similar to what I do. But you probably see this a lot on Twitter, mostly with handicappers saying, oh, this is a 5-unit bet, a 3-unit bet, 2-unit bet, whatever. The only thing you need to know regarding a unit scale is that 1 unit equals 1% of your bankroll. So it's a way for people to just signify confidence in a play without putting out specific dollar figures. So, $1,000 bet for one person might be the same as a $10 bet for another, depending on the bankroll. So one way to make everything uniform is just to do it in a unit scale. And again, this is pretty similar to what I do. So there's nothing wrong with the unit scale. You just need to understand that, like I said, 1 unit equals 1% of your bankroll, and so far on and so forth. So if someone says this is a 3-unit play, you put 3% of your bankroll on. 5 units, 5% of your bankroll. It's pretty simple, but it's important to understand because you probably see that a lot, like I said, on social media. And I'll even do it sometimes myself. Sometimes I mean to say 5%, I'll say 5-unit. You can view them as interchangeable. But again, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm certainly not denouncing the unit scale. It all just depends on how you go about deciding how many units to put on a bet. That's obviously the most important thing. So one method of how to determine how many units or percent or even dollar amount to put on a specific bet is called the Kelly criterion method. And this is one that I actually recommend 100%. I think the Kelly criterion method is a great way to determine how much you should put on a bet. Now it is a mathematical formula. Luckily, you don't need to know what that formula is. OddsJam has a calculator that you can use for free that'll show you how the calculations work and everything, which I'll show here in just a minute. But the only thing that you need to know about the Kelly criterion method is it spits out, like I said, an actual percent of what you should wager on your bankroll, and it uses mostly 2 things to determine this amount. Number 1 is the odds that you're betting it at. So this is going to be the actual sports book and the actual odds that you're placing. So plus 150, plus 130, whatever. The next thing that it looks at is the win percentage. And now this is based on your model, based on the OddsJam perfect line, based on however you determine the actual win percentage of this bet. It takes those 2 factors and then it spits out an actual, like I said, percent. Now, let me share my screen and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the first thing we see here, the Kelly multiplier, I'll talk about in just a second. I keep mine at 0.5. Another rule of thumb is 0.33. Either way, 0.5 is the highest it should be, and you should almost never have it at 1, and I'll detail exactly why. So the odds, like I said, these are going to be the odds that you're actually betting. So let's pretend I'm betting something at plus 110 odds. The win percentage, like I said, this is going to be based on your model or the handicapper if they tell you something. For me, for the win percentage, I get this from the OddsJam line, which is pulled from the sharpest book in the world, which I'll show you how to calculate. Let's pretend this is at 55%. So you see, this tells me I should wager 7% of my bankroll. Now, if you remember, I said that you should never wager above 5% of your bankroll. So if I had this at 1, it would have almost 14% of my bankroll of what I should bet. Now, a 55% win percentage at plus 110 odds is pretty unlikely. So even if I put this down at 50, this is more likely. It's telling you to bet almost 5% of your bankroll, 4.5, which is just too high. So if you keep it at 0.5 or even 0.33, it's a much more reasonable number. And that's why, like I said, I have mine at 0.5. Like again, it's totally up to your comfort level. Some people, if they want to bet higher amount of their bankroll on a specific bet, you can have it at 0.5. If you want to be a little more risk averse, a little more safe, you can have it at 0.33. So that was all talking in hypotheticals. It's easiest if we just use a real life example. So what I have up here is the OddsJam positive expected value page. This is actually the bread and butter for me and how I go about, where I go about placing like 99% of my bets. And let's just use this first example. Jaylen Brown made threes under 2.5. Now we're betting this at plus 114 on FanDuel. So this would go in the plus 114 section of the odds. The win percentage is based on the no vig odds of the OddsJam perfect line. So this OddsJam line here is pulled from the sharpest sportsbook in the world, and removing the vig gives us the true line. And so this is what goes into determining the win percentage of the bet, the no vig odds of the OddsJam perfect line. So one interesting little fact about sports betting, and I can show you exactly what I'm talking about, is whenever sportsbooks price odds to a specific play, all they're doing is they're designating a win percentage to that specific play. So all odds are going to have an associated win percentage. And this calculator here, the betting odds converter, is where you can find out what odds equate to what winning percentage. So for this one, the OddsJam line was at essentially minus 102. So if I type in minus 102 here, I know that the win percentage is roughly 50%. So I know the win percentage, I know the odds that I'm betting it at, and I have my Kelly calculator, like I said, at 0.5. So if I click this little calculator here from the OddsJam positive expected value page, it's telling me to bet 3.64% of my bankroll. Again, the odds, and it tells me what the play is. The win percentage, like I said, is based on the no vig odds of the OddsJam perfect line. And I have my Kelly calculator at 0.5. If I had this at 1, like I mentioned, now it's telling me to bet over 7% of my bankroll. And that, like I said, that's just too high. So having it at 5 is a much more reasonable number, and it's rare you ever get to situations where it's telling you to bet over 5% of your bankroll. Okay, and now for the final reveal. If someone were to ask me, Matt, thanks for telling me about the Kelly criterion method, thanks for telling me what a unit means, and thanks for telling me to not bet a flat rate on every single bet, you still haven't answered the question of how do you go about determining how much money to put on a bet? Now that's what I'll detail right now, so thanks for sticking with me. So I actually have 2 ways of going about determining this. Number 1 is specific to player props. Number 2 is specific to game props. Now for player props, I'll start with that one. I use the Kelly criterion method exactly. I don't mess around with it at all. If I'm going through the positive EV page and I want to place this hockey bet, I'll follow this exactly. So in the OddsJam software, you can put in your bankroll. So that's where this amount to wager comes from. If not, you just have to calculate it from your bankroll. So if I'm going about looking at the OddsJam page, finding player props that I really like. Ooh, Klay Thompson to go under 3.5 made threes. Telling me to bet $55 on this. You know what? That sounds pretty good. I actually like that bet. I'm going to go ahead and lock that in for $55. So looking at PointsBet, the odds are actually minus 121, which is fine. Now it's telling me to put $50 on it. Doesn't change it that dramatically. So here we go. $50 bet. Klay Thompson to go under 3.5 made 3-pointers. But regardless, for player props, I religiously use the Kelly criterion method. I view game props a little bit differently, which I'll detail why in just a second. But for game props, to answer your question, I go off the Kelly calculator. So for game props, I actually use this column here, width. This column shows you what the market width is. It's determined based off of both sides of the OddsJam line, and the lower numbers, the better. So essentially what this width column calculates, the confidence in the OddsJam line. The lower the numbers equals more confidence. The higher the numbers equals less confidence. And the dollar figure I go about placing on these bets, I have a 3-tiered system, all based on the market width. Tier number 1 is anything above 25 cents. So that would be these 2 plays right here. Under 3 runs, over 6 runs in this Asian baseball league. These would fall in the tier anything above 25 cents. So 26 and above. So anything that fits within tier, I'm only comfortable putting up to 1% of my bankroll on. Because it's such a wide market, that means that the OddsJam line isn't super confident in what they're pricing these lines, which means that it might not be as valuable of a bet. So I'm not saying to avoid these entirely, just put only 1% of your bankroll on. So for a $1,000 bankroll, you should bet, or $10 on this play, 1% of your bankroll. If I were to click this calculator, this one tells me 1.15. So this one actually isn't that far off. But sometimes you could have a wider market and it'll tell you to put over that amount. So number 1, the first tier, anything above 25 cents in market width, 1% of your bankroll. The second tier is anything between 16 and 25 cents. So this one would fall within that range. This one right here. That tier is you should put up to 3% of your bankroll on. So anything between 16 and 25 cents, you should put 3% of your bankroll on. So this one, even though it's only telling me I should put 1.6, I would round this up to 3. So for a $1,000 bankroll, you should put $30 on anything within that tier. Now, the last tier, anything 15 and below, this is something that I am very confident on. If you've watched my videos, I call it a load city. I call it a mixed slam. Unfortunately, there aren't any examples of a mixed slam on the screen here, but anything that has 15 cents and below, that is a max out type of bet. That is 5% of your bankroll. So for, again, a $1,000 bankroll, anything that has 15 cents and below in market width, you should put $50 on, 5% of your bankroll. The logic being, like I said, the tighter the market, the better. So even though if you look at the calculator, it's only telling you to put even less than 1% of your bankroll on, if you're finding a positive expected value bet that has such a tight market, that's actually more valuable than a bet that the calculator might tell you to put a little more on it. Like this one up here, it's telling me to put 1.15. This one is telling me to put 2.15. As good as the Kelly calculator is, it doesn't take into account market width at all. It's only those two factors, the odds and the win percentage. For game props, market width is essential. It's incredibly important. So that's why I have the 3 tiers. Again, the first tier is anything above 25 cents. You should put up to 1% of your bankroll on. The second tier, between 16 and 25 cents, you should put 3% of your bankroll on. And then the last tier, a McSlam, a Load City, whatever fun name you want to call it, 15 cents and below, you should put up to 5% of your bankroll on. Hopefully that video made sense. If not, please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. You can email us, contact@oddsjam.com. You can hit me up on Twitter at my handle you see here on the screen, Modi_Matt. Very boring, just my last name, comma, first name. But most importantly, one thing I do want to stop and highlight is if you look at the description of the video, you'll see a bunch of different calendar links, including myself. So basically, what you can do is schedule a call, a one-on-one call with any one of our sports betting experts at OddsJam and ask us any questions you have. Whether you have a question about this specific video or just anything regarding sports betting, everybody on that list has made money betting on sports using OddsJam. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I know I myself would be happy to meet with anybody, and I know that anybody else would also be happy to meet with anybody. Other than that, would appreciate, like I said, if you could like and comment on the video, let us know your feedback that way. And then if you could subscribe to the OddsJam YouTube channel, we have a ton of helpful content, whether you're a beginner or an expert. So please click that plus button, subscribe to the OddsJam YouTube channel, and start cashing. But as far as this video goes, that's all I got for you. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.